Since the minimum wage went up to $14 an hour on the 1st of January, we have been hearing a lot about the impact on businesses. Businesses that will likely raise prices to accommodate rising costs, but businesses raise prices for all sorts of reasons, and we hardly raise an eyebrow. So why are people so agitated about it now? Armin Yalnizyan, economist, one of our business columnists, is here. Good morning.
Good morning.
When the minimum wage goes up, it obviously pushes up the cost of doing business. How important are labor costs in the scheme of things, if you look at the big picture for businesses?
Yeah, well, when you look at how much labor costs different businesses, it depends on the industry they're operating in. I did a piece for Metro Morning a while back on the big three negotiations with Unifor, and I was shocked to learn that labor was 4% of the total costs of buying a car, and that's because they spend more on capital equipment, more on marketing, more on transportation.
You're shocked that it was that low?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people are, because we spend so much time talking about, oh my God, the labor costs. 4% of the cost of the average car. And in the restaurant business, which is sucking up a lot of oxygen in this conversation, I've learned that full-service restaurants, about a third of their costs go to labor. And in fast food, it's as low as 23%. And their point is to keep the labor costs down because they have less control over other costs than they do over labor. For example, they've got less control over rentals and foods and executive compensation and shareholder demands, for example, as we've learned with Sears.
Let's take a look at Tim Hortons. The case of Tim Hortons gets a lot of attention for all sorts of reasons. What were some of the other reasons that Tim Hortons would raise prices?
Well, so it's been raised 3 times in the last decade or so. So in 2011, it was raised by a cup of coffee was raised by 7 cents, and the reason cited was rising cost of coffee beans. In 2014, they raised the price of a cup of coffee by 10 cents. And then they said the same thing. Well, by the way, in 2011, there was no increase in the minimum wage. By 2014, the minimum wage went up by 75 cents an hour. They didn't cite labor costs. They said, again, coffee bean prices. And that they had booked over $27 million in costs related to the Burger King deal. And then in 2017, minimum wage had gone up by 20 cents every year for the next 3 years, and the price of coffee went up by 10 cents. Again, higher operating costs were cited. They were mostly driven by the cost of expanding. Now the Ontario franchisees of Tim Hortons want higher prices to cover this significant increase, 23% increase in the minimum wage, but the company is not responding with price increases as yet.
It is a significant wage hike. Are they worried that higher prices would hurt their business?
Yeah, and that's a really good question. If you accept the franchisee's own estimate of what the additional costs will be, they say about $250,000 each in additional new labor costs in Ontario for about 1,400 franchisees. It would take you 50 cents per cup of coffee to cover all of those costs. If you made coffee, pay for it all. Now, if that happened, 50 cents more a cup of coffee, you're going to have some low-income earners like pensioners buying less coffee. But don't forget, there are millions of people that are going to make $2 that are making $2.50 an hour more right now, and they're going to be buying more things, including more coffee. And that's kind of the point about the minimum wage. Higher income earners, when they get wage increases, they save some of their money, they go on vacations, they buy some higher end things. When low-income people get more money, they spend more of it on rent. They sometimes move to a new place. They spend it in the local economy.
And it goes right back into that economy.
Right back. So you're boosting the local economy when you boost the minimum wage.
So if a higher minimum wage could actually be good for business, why are we hearing the tortured cries from businesses?
Well, you will always hear tortured cries from businesses, like the King Street closure, right? Anytime there's something that hits business, you're going to hear from some.
But they have spoken out, and we've heard this on our program. I mean, I don't mean to diminish by using that phrase, but they have spoken out on this program. They don't agree with that logic.
Oh, absolutely, they don't agree with that logic, and some of them will struggle, Matt. Some of them will close because it's the last straw for some of them. But it's also true that some businesses are going to get more demand, and there are businesses out out there that are saying, we see this as being really good for our business, for having more purchasing power in the economy. That's going to drive our business. But, there was a letter to the editor by John Cartwright in the Globe and Mail just on Wednesday, I think, saying that our economy is full of multi-billion-dollar chains like Tim Hortons, which rely and prosper on a business model based on poverty wages. We just heard $1,700 a month for rent. A full-time job at the minimum wage. You wouldn't have any money left if you were putting a roof over your head because of taxes you have to pay. So, the higher minimum wage may not be the solution for a handful of those 1,400 Tim Hortons franchisees, but it sure is a solution for millions of Ontario's workers.
Armin, thank you.
Thank you.
Armin Yalnazine, one of our business commentators on Metro Morning.